Hello and welcome to the show. This podcast is about health, home, and the real lives we're living inside both. The environments we live in, the choices we make for our families, and the many factors shaping those choices every day. I'm your host, Holly Jean Mullen. I am a functional health practitioner turned wellness focused realtor in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Over the years, I've worked with families navigating chronic health challenges, environmental stressors, and big life transitions. And what I've learned is that nothing exists in isolation. What's happening in the body, the home, and our personal lives is often connected. In a world that loves quick fixes and sound bites, this show makes room for nuance, for thoughtful conversations with practitioners, parents, professionals, and people with lived experience who are trying to make grounded, intentional decisions for their health and their homes. If you've ever felt like there was more to the story, or you're simply trying to live well where you are, you're in the right place. Today's conversation is about something most people feel but don't always have the language for: the way a space affects your body. We spend so much time focusing on food and supplements and the right morning routine, all the things we're doing for our health. But one of the biggest inputs our nervous system is responding to every single day is the space we live in. You've probably felt this before. You walk into a room and immediately it's like a breath of fresh air. You exhale. Or the opposite, something feels off. You're a little tense or it feels chaotic and you can't really explain why. This isn't just personal preference or you being weird. Your body is constantly reading and responding to our environments around us. So today we're diving into something called trauma-informed interior design. It's the idea that our homes can be intentionally designed to support safety, calm, and nervous system regulation. My guest today is Laura McCall. She is the founder of Collected Interiors, the design studio focused on creating homes that reflect the lives and the stories of the people living in them. Her work centers on translating a family story or a person's story, lifestyle, and values into a space that feels welcoming and personal and uniquely lived in. She specializes in helping clients shape homes that are not only beautiful, but functional and supportive of the way people actually live life day to day. And today we're going to talk about how design choices, things like color, light, layout, materials, and even flow, can either calm and support the nervous system or keep it on edge. Our homes aren't neutral ground, and as part of our environments, our homes are continuously influencing our physiology, either positively or negatively, slightly or drastically. Simply translated, our environments and our homes are either helping us unwind or adding to the load our nervous system is already carrying. So let's just get into it and bring on my guest for this episode, Laura McCall. Welcome to the show, Laura. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
Good.
So, why don't we just start off with you telling us a little bit of an overview of about what your business is?
Mhm. So I am an interior designer. I specialize in remodels. My husband and I have flipped homes. But really, what I kind of the umbrella that I work under is I'm a trauma informed interior designer. And so, from whether that's working with a high end client, doing a full remodel, or I've also worked with many organizations that have housed women coming out of traumatic life experiences like homelessness and abuse and addiction, incarceration, helping them, anyone I work with, but create a space that is trauma informed.
Okay. I know that you just explained what that means,
Yeah.
but it still can be a little bit confusing because you say trauma informed, so people might picture therapy offices or hospitals, but you're applying this to everyday homes. So
Right.
can you give an example of like what that might look like?
Sure. So, whether we're dealing with big T or little t trauma, I very much believe and research tells us this. Like, we know that our space impacts the way that we feel, the way that we think, the way that we heal. And so, what I do is I work with clients and I hear their story, and then we use that as the guidepost for all of our decisions. A trauma informed space, home, means that we are using the client's story. We are bringing in agency and control and privacy, so that there is an actual shift in the nervous system when they walk through the threshold of their room or their home, whatever it may be, that they can take a deep breath, because our space impacts our nervous system. And so the idea is that we are creating spaces that can actually bring us out of fight or flight mode into a place where we can actually think clearly and fully heal. So whether that is someone coming out of a traumatic life experience, for example, I worked with multiple women who have come out of incarceration. So they have now been housed. They have a roof over their heads. They have a bed. This is great. This is so amazing. And they're typically working with an organization that has a program for them. But they're looking at white walls. They're looking at something that feels temporary. And so they're not really able to shift out of that mode. What we want is for them to come into a space that feels like theirs, that everywhere their eyes lands, that there's something that's grounding them and reminding them of who they are and where they're going. And so again, I incorporate that with all of my clients. So usually I will start my meetings with my clients and say, to what level you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your story. I will ask them, what does home mean to you? And then from that, we're going to build a design.
So as you're speaking, I'm picturing like with the example that you gave, someone coming out of an incarceration scenario, and now they're sitting in a home that
Right.
is now theirs, but they're looking at empty walls, and empty walls can very much resemble an empty cell. And
Exactly.
so trying to fill that with something that feels like them or feels like their life or feels like a home. How did like I'm sorry that I'm stumbling over my words, but I'm like imagining if I had come from maybe an upbringing that was not great or a life that I don't want to remember growing up in that
Right.
resulted in choices that landed me in
Right.
jail. Like how do you start over? How do you meet
Mm.
someone in that moment and even begin to like help them put things together that would make them feel safe and give them hope?
Yep. That's a loaded question. But I'm going to,
Sorry.
no, I love it.
I've never asked you, and we've had so many conversations and I've never asked you that
Yeah,
before.
yeah. So I want to answer this in two parts, and I want to speak to kind of my work with women that are coming out of those type of life events. When I ask them, to what level you're comfortable, I'd love to hear your story. A lot of this is intuitive. Truly, I believe that God has given me this gift that when they're telling me their story, it just kind of starts to come together. However, I'm using bits and pieces that they're telling me as kind of anchors. So, for example, one of the women I worked with, one of my favorites, just had the most heartbreaking story. It was such an honor to sit at her feet and listen to her story. This is a woman that had been in prison. Um, when she'd been out for a while, she was doing fantastic. She had been housed working with this organization, but again, was living in a room that was just empty. So she's telling me her story, how she got in prison, what her experience with life in prison, what her relationship had been like with her children. I mean, just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. But while she was speaking, she talked about her grandma growing up. And when she talked about grandma, she just lit up. And so right there, I saw a shift in her. And I'm like, tell me about grandma. How did you feel with grandma? Why was she special to you and in your life? And so, I mean, her whole physique changed as she talked about grandma. And then she said, in fact, I have some of her church lady hats in that tub over there, and they are so special to me. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I have them. And I said, I know exactly what we're going to do with them. And we used those as the catalyst for the rest of the room. So one was like this bright teal, one was a yellow. And so those went over her bed, and every color choice, everything else we selected was based off of that. I would say to her, when she talked about a story about grandma, and I would say, what's a color that goes along with that feeling of joy? And she said, oh, yellow. So that was the bedding, was yellow. We're going to wrap this woman in this color. But in addition to those questions, I will say, what are colors or patterns or images that we need to avoid? And here's why this matters a lot. We have, and I want to be so careful to not ever knock anyone else doing things differently, because we're all gifted in different areas. There are a lot of groups that are kind of doing a trauma-informed approach as like a kind of like a global scale, if you will. Okay, we want this space to feel happy, so let's paint it orange because maybe that feels like a happy color. But to me, I'm like, well, what if grandpa wore an orange shirt? Like, what if something is very triggering about this to this one individual? And so I always ask, and those, it's fascinating because people will really quickly be able to say, I don't want plaid anywhere. I don't want floral. Floral reminds me of, XYZ. And so I'm using their story, both the beautiful parts and the painful parts, to be our guide and kind of help navigate through those choices. That is my answer to, that's how I know. They're telling me, and then I'm just kind of pulling pieces out of their story. But I also want to speak to, and you asked this, and also I'm just going to say it, but that same approach is what I use with my high-end clients, because our space, even if we're not coming out of a life event like that, our space still echoes negative messaging. Like, for example, if we have a room that just feels it, we just haven't completed it, we haven't hung anything on the walls, we're constantly thinking about, ways we can make it better, that can echo back to us, you're a failure, you never accomplish anything. Like, these are messages that we can send to ourselves in our home. And so that is kind of how that can also work when we're maybe not diving into big T trauma necessarily. I'm not showing up as a therapist by any means with anyone I'm working with, but if it's not a life event that we're moving away from, it's just sometimes our home is sending us messages that is continuing an echo maybe from our childhood, or continuing echoes that are painful. I will say to clients, how do you want to feel when you come into this space? What's working for you and what is not? What are you currently hearing about yourself when you're in this room or in this home that doesn't feel good? And so that's another way that I can use it, kind of no matter who I'm working with.
Wow. You hit on something for me when you were saying that, but this episode is not about me. So
do we need to dive into something?
No, we can come back.
Okay.
But you said something earlier about when you said you would sit at someone's feet. Do you have a background in like prison ministry? Because this feels like almost a ministry as much as it is your profession.
It for sure is a ministry. I do not have a background in prison ministry. I do have a background in working with women in different group settings. I have some training and experience facilitating kind of like group work, like story work, working with women who are feeling stuck in their lives. We kind of can go hunting for the root cause of that. And so that's something. And that's honestly how I got into this. I was doing design work, and I just have such a heart for women in all walks of life. And that's kind of how these two worlds collided, as I'm learning more and understanding more and experiencing more, like, oh my gosh, our spaces impact us no matter where we are, no matter what walk of life we're in. And I'm doing all this like story work and child, like inner child work with women. I'm like, this all goes together. And if I can, like, you and I didn't talk about this, so I'm just going to kind of jump into it, but I believe that this is biblical. Like, I believe like our home matters to God from Genesis to Revelation. And you cut this out if you want to, I'm going to say it. Genesis to Revelation, there is talk of home. I feel like the garden was the first trauma-informed space. And although this world is not our home, there's so many references about the importance of home. It's where we heal. It's where we fall apart. It's where we invite others in. It's where we're hospitable. This matters. And I don't mean that from a place of vanity. I am not saying everyone should spend a lot of money on their homes. I am saying your home should tell your story so that you can minister to others well, so it can fill you up. It is a place where you can connect with God and connect with others. And that I feel so passionate about. Sorry, I just kind of went off on that, but
No, I've kind of spoken to this a little bit, not exactly in this exact capacity, but I have in the past and past episodes spoken to one is like our bodies as homes, but
yes,
also yes as our space. And it doesn't matter exactly what your whole home looks like or
right.
anything, but as long as you have like an area that you can go to where you can find a sense of peace or calm that you can just carve out and like it doesn't even have to be your home as long as you have
Right.
somewhere that you can go and feel peace and calm and safety.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
so having that, having a designated place to go, but also feeling that within your body, because whether you are religious or not, or believe in a God or not, like we
Right.
are holy vessels and holy beings. And when we do need to honor ourselves and our spaces as sacred.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm working on a book right now, and it's like about coming back home to ourselves, um, and to God, and how our space can impact that. So I'm a strong believer of that for sure.
Why don't we then transition away from trauma into this whole home as a whole? When people are thinking of anxiety or tension, they're thinking that that's something that happens inside. But you
Mhm.
did already kind of touch on how our home can reflect things back to us.
Yep.
So how can things in our home, aside from coming from big T or little T trauma,
Mhm.
how are some ways that our homes can trigger unrest or
Yeah.
anxiety within
Yep.
us?
Um, 100 million ways, that are also so specific to the person. So where one person might, maybe they grew up in a very cluttered home and that was problematic. And maybe, in fact, I have lots of clients who did just that. Maybe mom was a bit of a hoarder, things like that. And so for them, they need a very minimalist approach, right? Or clutter can be so, so triggering. So with that client, we're gonna talk a lot about like storage needs and do we want closed shelving instead of open shelving, right? And then on the other hand, I may have a client who's like, I was never allowed to put my artwork up. My mom kept our house. Again, I know we're trying to get away from trauma, but I'm sorry, it just always is going to show up. But we had to keep it perfect and we weren't allowed to make a mess. And I was never allowed to leave my stuff out. And I now have the freedom. So then it's like, we want stuff. We want to fill the walls. We want open shelving with little oddities and things that feel like theirs. And so it really, that's why it always comes back to the story is what is your story? And then from there, we're going to determine, kind of what is causing the anxiety, what is echoing to you. I mean, gosh, it can be you're not enough, you're not worth it. All of these things, all of the messages we hear out there in the world. What is wild, and this is probably a whole other podcast, is we can actually we subconsciously create that in our homes, and so unknowingly, and it's almost like the self-fulfilling prophecy that we're never not hearing this. And so, um, to answer your question, it just depends on the person and the story. But it often does come down to things. A lot of times it comes down to what some would call clutter and then some would call, like wanting to move away from kind of a minimalist or, everything has to be perfect. But that seems to be kind of a common thread with a lot of people. Also
I mean, it,
color. That's another piece I should speak to, and lighting. Oh my gosh, lighting. That again could be a whole other conversation, but the temperature of lighting can sometimes be just like the change that was needed. A lot of people don't understand like daylight, blue light, how that's impacting them. And so a lot of times it's like, what would it look like if we shut down overhead and we moved to lamp lighting, even or natural light, things like that. And then colors. Colors are a huge, huge part of the story. And so I think that those are pretty, and then from there's probably, like I said, hundreds of other options, but those are pretty common, I should say.
So there's always at the start of a new year what's in and what's out in terms of like design trends. And there's always going to be, in our HGTV culture
Mhm.
saying what's appropriate to have in your home. And there's always going to be what's trending and what's not. But I think so many people struggle with one decorating or designing their homes because there are so many people, so many voices telling us what we should and should not have. And
Yep.
so people who don't have a design eye, like me, don't know what to do. We're afraid to put our personality into things.
Mhm.
Things feel half finished or
Yep.
incomplete.
Yep.
Do you have any design rules that are maybe more universal that don't necessarily have a trend that go with them, but just like something that could be applicable across all styles?
So I have this saying I say a lot, and it's don't should on yourself. Because that is like that again is kind of back to that messaging of I should, right? I always think that should is connected to shame. And so we're hearing all these voices out there what you should and shouldn't be doing. And here we are again, right back to like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not enough. I don't know how to. I'm an idiot, all these things. And so I don't follow any trends or rules. Unless I had a client that was like, it's really important to me. Like if I had a client who I need to present my home in a certain way and this is important to me, then that is something we would follow. But I am not someone who's going to say, okay, this is very in. I have no idea what the color of the year is because I could not care less. Um,
Well, and it
it's just
depends on who you ask.
that's just it. Like I these roles are kind of funny to me. I actually I have again, I everyone has their own kind of niche, and there definitely are people out there who are like, "Hey, I need a designer. Just come in and tell me what's beautiful. Just tell me what to do." And that's awesome. That's just not how I operate. Um, a very high end, well known designer recently came out with this kind of list of rules. One was like, "Do not put family photos in living spaces." I mean, it was like this hard and fast rule. And that just kind of blew my mind. And I under or never put your furniture up against a wall. And okay, so I want to say this like from a design lens, I get it. I actually understand why floating your furniture when you're just looking at it from a design lens, it does look better. But what if I have a client who really struggles not having their back against the wall because they have that maybe there's a lot of anxiety with knowing that somebody could come from behind. And there's just like I have some feelings about these kind of universal rules. I'm like, man, that is not considering the person. And so then all we're doing is we're kind of making a list of shaming rules that people are maybe trying to follow, but still not feeling good in their space. And I've done this checklist of things that I'm supposed to do, and I still don't feel at home in my space. Well, that's because the person was never considered, you know? So no, I don't have it. I guess my rule would be there are none. And I am always, always, always going to be client led. I just am. Their story is always going to be the guidepost for what we do. There may be some things, like I might say, if we're working on shelves or something, I might say, okay, groups of 3 work really well. Let's kind of put this in groups of 3. There's some little things like that that I might suggest from a design standpoint, but I would just never feel good coming into someone's home and telling them what they should or should not do. It's just not who I am.
And there's always exceptions. Like I was watching one thing where it said, if all of your furniture is very geometric and it all has sharp edges, then you have to have something that's round, or your space just feels very aggressive or angry. And I was like, but I've also seen amazing rooms where everything was very
Yeah.
geometric. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's all just how you put it together.
That's
So
right. Yeah.
there's always exceptions.
Exactly.
Are there like design patterns you consistently see in homes where people feel overwhelmed?
Mhm.
Like, do you see something where it's like this person, like this client is, or in homes where the client is typically overwhelmed, this is something that I'm seeing?
No, I think that, I
No,
mean,
okay.
honestly, it kind of just comes back to the person because I actually have a client in mind who is just kind of, again, like her story was very much like she had no say, no control as a kid. And man, she just loves to mix and match patterns. So there's just going to be a lot going on. And she's the one who wants open shelving with all these little things. And or somebody else may come in and that just feels like so much going on. So it really, and you know this, like listeners know this, but anxiety just looks so different for so many different people that our spaces and like what's going to be calming and healing is going to just be so specific to the person. I think there are some things, generally speaking. I mean, if you think of like if you've ever been to like a spa or a hotel, um, that's supposed to bring like a calming. There is kind of an overall sense of we're using biophilia and there's plants and there's green and there's lots of natural organic elements and there's wood tones and everything's very neutral. So I would say on a general overall scope, that those tend to be calming. If I were designing a space for a large group of people, I would probably tend to lean towards that. There's a woman out of Oregon who did oh, I cannot think of the name of it. Something about something path. Anyway, she redid a homeless shelter using those guidelines, and it is phenomenal. I mean, the work that she did, and then the statistics of the change in their homeless community after this beautiful, beautiful greens and lots of wood tones and all the things. I mean, it's just incredible. And so I do think for sure there are some kind of general guidelines for that. But when I'm working with an individual, I'm always going to use their story.
Yeah, that's actually a good point that you bring up because within the the real estate industry, and they're just like kind of lumping in wellness design in that wellness real estate, and that's including like hotels. Hotels are really into this. They're calling it wellness tourism, but I'm going to lump it into design because it's the
Yep.
design of the hotels and the resorts and
Yep.
Airbnbs, but everything is leaning towards that more spa-like
Mhm.
um biophilic design where it
Yep.
is bringing in more of those natural elements.
Yep.
That portion of real estate is growing faster than the entire real estate industry itself
Yeah,
because people are responding to it, whether or not they know exactly what they're responding to,
for
their
sure.
bodies are
Yes.
responding to it, and
Yep.
people do really want it. And when you were saying about colors and stuff, and there's colors of the year, and we keep seeing that the gray trend is finally leaving.
Yes.
All the gray, all the white, everything's leaving. We're finally seeing now more color coming back.
Mhm.
However, on the real estate side, if you go ask any realtor now, like someone wanted to sell their home and we're going into a home that has all different colors, we're recommending to paint white, neutral,
Yep.
everything because the buyer still
Yep.
wants everything to be neutral.
That's
It's so funny.
fascinating.
It's like these
Well,
it's very contradictory.
yeah. It's interesting in that, I mean, I would love to pick your brain about this. It's not something you and I have actually talked about ever, but, so my husband and I, like I said, we flip houses. And so I kind of bring this whenever all the things I do into our flips and they do look different. Like I don't do the black, white, and gray flip, I kind of let the house tell a story and I will stage it, very much with a story to tell. And so I understand that typically whenever, realtors are having houses staged, it's like, let's make this a blank canvas so that anyone can imagine their stuff here. I don't disagree. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I've just taken this other approach that I'm going to create a story that the buyers want to be a part of. And I will tell you, our houses fly off the market.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm creating something that they're like, I want to be a part of what's happening here. And again, I don't think one is right or wrong. And I think it has to be done really thoughtfully and done well. Um, so anyway, but it is a whole fascinating thing. And then back to like the hotel piece and just kind of the overall, I think that really if somebody needed to create a space that was needing to accommodate multiple people or multiple clients, going back to nature is always a win. It's always a win because we we are just meant to be connected to nature. We were created to be that. When we hear birds, when we hear water moving, when our eyes literally see organic elements, it does a shift inside of us. And so that would be advice I would give kind of as a like a general guideline is if you needed to create a space like that, different greens and wood tones and neutrals are always, for the most part, they are safe choices.
Yes, I agree. And now I want to have a completely different conversation.
I told you we're gonna have so many of these.
Uh, I will say there is a difference between a beautifully decorated and staged home will always sell
Yep.
more than just like a blank neutral home. But
Right.
if you're already if a home is already like lived in and there's a lot
Mhm.
going on, neutral.
Yeah, I know.
Those are
I
there's two different scenarios there.
for
But
sure,
yeah.
totally agree with that.
We talked about kind of there being a psychology of a home and how the home really is the backdrop of our life. It's where our body resets every day.
Yes.
Why do people often underestimate or maybe not even really notice the emotional impact of their homes, do you think?
I think we operate at such a high level of stress. We don't even, myself included, I mean, I don't know many people that have gotten really good at practicing rest, like scheduling rest. And so I think we as a society are just so conditioned to be going all of the time and to feel unsettled a lot of the time. And then we're also like, I need to get away. I need a weekend away. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that that's kind of the mentality. Um, so I don't think it's normal to be like, I just want to be in my home. Especially as women, we'll kind of say that from like an isolating, like we're kind of self-isolating, or maybe our social battery is running low, like we'll just want to be home. But I don't know that people naturally want to be home because it's where they feel the safest and the calmest. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm wording it, but I just think generally speaking, we are not in practice of putting this type of energy into our homes. It's almost like our homes can kind of be the junk drawer of our life. So it's kind of like the place where we just throw all the crap. And and on one hand, maybe there's some freedom that we don't have to like keep up with the Joneses and it doesn't have to be perfect. But then when we live in that all the time, we're just like constantly having that negative messaging. So I think people don't realize it's an option.
As you were describing that, I was picturing how we've become a society of whether or not both parents are working or whether even if there's parents, it's like we've become such a society of busy
Yep.
where I picture our home kind of becoming one big mudroom where it's like
Yes.
it just is like where we come and we drop things off and we
Right.
grab stuff and we leave and we drop things off
Right.
and we grab stuff and we leave. And I really do think that one of the biggest blessings of the whole COVID thing was people having to be home. And I've seen a big shift coming out of that with
Right.
more people working from home and doing major career changes and
Yep.
major life changes just coming out of that whole thing to
For sure.
where there is a lot more thought and consideration into the home and how we live in home and the time we spend at home
For sure.
because of that whole thing. Because we all
Yeah.
had to be home for so long.
Yep.
And I think in the back of everyone's mind, or at least in the back of the minds of people that I'm around, and maybe in the back of other people's minds, whether it's acknowledged or not, is
Hmm.
if this happens again, is this a place I want to
Right.
spend my time? Can you
Right.
give an example of differences you've seen in people after you've gone in and helped them with their
Mm.
homes? What kind of changes do you see?
That is always one of my favorite things is I want to make sure. So side note, I don't want this to feel prideful. That feels really important to me. When people, I might cry talking about it actually, but when I've worked with a client and we're done and we've gotten to kind of incorporate their story, they are always blown away and like didn't know what they were signing up for. And once they fully experience and understand not me and not the work I do, but what we've done and what we've created and what we've pulled out of them, and when they're able to look around and see their story reflected back in their home and they feel that anchored, like, I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I know where I'm going. It is so exciting to see how empowered these people can be. The woman I told you about with the church lady hats, she wrote me a letter and she said that prior to me coming, she had some things she knew she wanted to do. And one of them was hair school. She wanted to put herself in hair school. And she told me that after her room was done, that she felt a shift in her nervous system and felt empowered and excited about life for the first time in a decade. And she enrolled herself in hair school. I mean, I'm like, that is why this matters right there. And it's just, that is the fuel that keeps me wanting to do this, you know? And so I will often hear clients say, I had no idea what was coming because they're like, my space doesn't feel right, but they don't know why, you know, and they don't even maybe know what they want. And so when we work together and we pull that out of them, and then that's what they're getting, it's just, the shift is huge. The shift is so huge when I have clients that trust me, and that trust me with their story. It is truly life-changing. And I say that is whether we are spending $20,000 or we are spending $500. This is not about budget, and this is not about you have to have beautiful high-end things. This is what matters to you. What is important to you? What is going to anchor you? And when we can use that, I mean, it's life-changing.
Just like along the budget thing, like I feel like it's the same for clothes and how we present ourselves too. You can put yourself together and look completely polished for a $5 thrift store outfit
Exactly. Right.
or a full designer outfit. Like it
Right.
doesn't matter the cost. It's all in
Yes.
how you put yourself together and how you carry yourself too. And then
100%.
I think that translates into a home as well. Cause I've
That's
seen
right.
amazing looking like DIY, like
Mhm.
thrifted and
Sure.
free
Oh,
stuffed
yeah.
homes.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I had,
incredible.
it was actually my sister. This was a long time ago. This is before I'd really launched my business. I've always kind of done this for friends and family, but she was married at the time to an active military man, and they had gone to post. And she's like, I have $500 and I have nothing. And we went thrift store shopping and garage selling. And in a weekend, we put together a house that felt like them and for nothing, you know? So this really is just about like finding what matters to you and then using that regardless of budget.
So for someone listening that maybe is thinking like looking around their house going like, I don't even know what's going on here.
Mhm.
Do you have tips or a starting point for someone? Like if they just want to start on their own of doing an assessment of what in my house makes me happy and what makes me angry or something. I don't know. Like
Yep.
what advice do you have for someone who just wants to test the waters?
Something I say a lot is get curious. And so I would encourage that person to kind of get curious. And so some questions I would maybe encourage would be okay, so let's just say we're talking about a room that you spend a lot of time in, or a room that you notice you avoid, maybe a room that is taking up energy in some way and you know needs to change. Um, is when I'm in this room, how do I feel? Um, does that remind me of a time when I was younger and I felt this way? Um, and what was going on when I first felt that way? So I'll just kind of give an example. Let's say that somebody had a room that just felt chaotic and they never went in there and it was always driving them crazy and they would like almost not look in it. I would say, how do you feel? I feel so much anxiety. When was a time that you remember feeling anxiety like that? Maybe when you were a kid. Right off the gate, like right out the gate, they're going to have something. It reminds, oh, I haven't even thought of this. It reminds me of when I was at grandma's house or when I was at, you know, and I would say, what was going on at that time? And then from there, it's, you know, what are you hearing about yourself and all of that? Like, what are some messages that you're hearing about yourself? And so that just kind of pinpoints why. And that matters because some people be like, well, of course, it's just messy. That's why it's bothering me. There's something else going on, or else you would have tidied it up. You know, there's something deeper than what is obvious on the surface, or else it would have been fixed already. And so you really need to go hunting for kind of like, where is this coming from? And where did this come? Like, where's this stemming from? What is it reminding me of? And then I would typically be like, what, like, let's say that this person that told me about the situation when they were a kid, I would say, well, how old were you when you started hearing that message about yourself? And if they were to say 8, I might say, well, what did 8-year-olds need that he or she didn't get? I needed XYZ, or maybe did 8-year-old have an adult in their life? And so then it's like, what qualities of that adult or like ideal parent did 8-year-old need? And then we kind of move that back into now. So like, um, maybe this ideal person, this ideal adult when you were 8, was really steady and strong and caring. Is there a color pattern or image that kind of goes along with those feelings, and how can we maybe incorporate that? And so your question was like, what tips would you have? This is kind of the process that I do. A lot of this can be self-assessed, but it all stems from like curiosity, getting curious about why I feel this way. When did this maybe start for me in my life? What is it reminding me of? Where is it taking me back to? What did I need at that time that I did not get? And how can I offer that to myself now? And then how would that maybe translate into action or into color or into storage needs or whatever for this space? But ultimately, it's like, what do you want to feel? Like, if these walls could tell a story, like, what do you want them to say? What do you want them to echo back to you? I'm safe. I'm held. I'm loved. I'm valuable. I'm accomplished. What is it that you're wanting to feel when you're in this space? And that a lot of times is a great starting point for just getting curious about the emotional components that are kind of driving the bus. That's a really long-winded answer, but
No.
it's just complicated. And I don't know that it's like, here are these 5 tips, it's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
it goes deeper than we realize. So,
right. But that last part where you're asking, like, how do you wanna feel? I feel like that is a good checklist to kinda go through if you're out shopping for decor
for
and for
sure.
things to bring into your home. So you're not just buying what's trendy or what catches your eye. It's really putting more thought into those impulse purchases and
Yep.
thinking about, like, really curating your space and how
Right.
do you wanna feel and what are you trying to create and bring in.
That's right.
And so
Yeah, and if we
maybe that could be more of a checklist.
that's for sure. Well, and like, how do you wanna feel? And then every decision you make is kind of, you're using that as a checkpoint. Like, is this gonna get
Yeah.
me closer to feeling like that? For sure. That works too.
Do you only work locally here in, the Tulsa area? Do you see clients virtually? How can someone work with you or reach out
Yeah.
to you if they're interested?
Currently, I really only work locally because of the type of work I do. I really prefer it to be in person because it's a really vulnerable, intimate time together. I just find that it works better in person in their space. So yeah, so I really work best locally.
Do you ever do any type of classes or group events or anything, or have you ever
I
considered
have
that or
done
thought of
some,
it?
yes. I do not have any on the docket currently, but yeah.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything else you would like to share or let us know?
I do want to say one thing, and this is, also how you and I kind of connected just with our love for all things healthy home. But one of the things I also think came out of COVID times where more and more people started getting curious about root causes. What is actually going on and what is really causing this? And I feel like we've got a wave of people that are more and more curious about what is really helping me and what's hurting me. And so I'm passionate about kind of educating others that our home is a big piece of that, whether it is the paint on the walls, the mechanics behind the walls. Our home is making us sick in many ways, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and it can also heal in many ways. So I think that we do have an uprising of people that are more aware of that. And I feel excited to be one of the ones out there helping people that kind of want to start getting more curious about that in their homes.
Yes, and I'm glad you touched on that because we are going to have a part 2 because I know there is more to your story on the health side
Yep.
and the impact of homes on your health personally.
Yep.
So that'll be the teaser for everyone because we will have a part 2. Where can people find you best and best reach out to you?
Yep. My website, Instagram is a great place.
I'll put everything in the show notes and stuff.
Yep.
So is that
Yep.
Collected Interiors?
Yep. Collected Interiors. You got it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on today. I
Yeah.
loved
Thanks for
having
having
you,
me.
enjoyed
Yeah.
our conversation, and we'll
Same.
have part 2.
Sounds good.
This conversation really reinforces the fact that wellness happens in the micro moments and decisions of our everyday lives, whether intentional or not. The spaces we live in every day factor into our wellness and physiology. Laura, this has been such a thoughtful conversation, and I love the way you work. Your work reminds us that our homes aren't just places we store stuff. They're the environments our bodies are living in every single day. And when we start to see our homes through that lens, even small changes can make meaningful differences in how we feel. So, thank you for sharing your perspective and the work that you're doing to help people create spaces that feel supportive, calming, and authentically lived in. If you would like to learn more about Laura and her work at Collected Interiors, I'll include links in the show notes so that you can explore what she's doing. And as always, remember this podcast is here to share ideas, information, and perspectives that may support your well being, but it's not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace medical advice. Always work with a qualified professional when making decisions about your health or your home. Thank you for spending this time with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Share it with a friend if you did. See you next time on the Health Starts at Home podcast.